can some of the revenue from this tax go into an entity which continues to build on the social justice movement of the campaign, continuing to engage citizens globally around social justice?
Ivor, would you like to start with that one?
Sounds a really good idea to me. However, I think what we've got to bear in mind is that any entity has got to actually have members, because if this is actually going to work, it's got to be the ordinary person in the community who is passionate about it and does something to actually change it. So while there could be some umbrella organisation, if that's what you're thinking of, that encourages this kind of thing to happen. As you can see on the screen with all of the organisations there, this kind of thing will only work with all of the organisations in the voluntary sector, or certainly a large number of them, joining together, and it's their constituents that are really the ones that are going to make things different. It's those people who are going to buy fair trade products. It's those ones who are going to lobby individual MPs and stand outside shops that are not doing fair trade, for example. So I think while yes, money could go into something like that, I think we need to be careful not to lose the fact that it's individual people up and down the countryside here and in other countries fighting for social justice that will actually make the change happen.
It's how do we continue to engage the stakeholders that we've asked to engage in this as a campaign to begin with, which I think is a really powerful movement in itself. So alongside the fact that this is governing finance, this is also engaging citizens globally, and I think there's something incredibly powerful in that piece. Yeah. So whether it's an entity or a decentralization of entities, I think that's something that we need to hold on to in this.
Yeah. Claire?
I think one of the things I find, as I said at the beginning, really exciting about this campaign is that it brings together poverty campaigners concerned about poverty in the developing world and people concerned with poverty here at home. I think, this is the first, I think, for a really big public campaign. I certainly hope it's the first of many, and that this is the beginning of that kind of conversation and engagement across continents, that we see, how many of the problems that we face are common. I also think that, when the tax is introduced, the campaign is going to need to keep going to make sure that the money is spent well, and that governments keep the promises that they made in introducing the tax and spend it in the way that we want them to spend it on fighting poverty here at home and on climate change. So I think there's I certainly hope this is the first of many campaigns for social justice that span countries, and in the short term that this campaign is going to need to keep going to make sure that governments spend the money well, even after we get the tax implemented, which obviously will happen very soon.
And Jeff?
Again, on the use of the funds, which I think you were asking about, when it comes to development, one of the most powerful lessons of delivery, not mobilization, but delivery, of the last 10 years, again, refers to these funds, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria, and Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. They both have in their governing structure not only traditional donor governments, but civil society internationally and within the recipient countries. And they have within their processes something very interesting and important, which is that it's not governments that are asking for the funding according to plans. It's national plans based on collaboration of government and civil society within the recipient countries, what are called the country coordination mechanisms. And the point is that we've learned that public, private, civil society partnerships for delivery of assistance are very, very powerful. And I think it goes to your question on how the funds are used. Best practice, state of the art, if I could put it in quotation marks that way, for the development practice that will be funded by this effort will surely engage civil society in very practical, programmatic ways in the use of the funds. And that we should insist as a standard for a new global health fund, a standard for a new fund for smallholder agriculture, a standard for turning a moderately failed fund, or big shortfall in process and funding at the World Bank for Education for All into a new global education fund. So I think that there's a way also on advocacy for the proper channeling of these funds into the highest performance delivery for the people that most urgently need this. I don't know if I could abuse this just to make a plug for another tax. I'm sorry, not a tax, but I'm going to do it anyway. We can't solve the problems of climate through the financial sector transactions. We're going to need to tax greenhouse gas emissions, period. And we're going to need levies across countries on greenhouse gas emissions. And the trading system idea, whatever one thinks about it, isn't going to substitute for the need for levies on greenhouse gases. I got to get my country, you got to help me get my country also doing that for the first time. And so I want to add in, not in this campaign, but in the broad problem solving, we're going to need the polluter pays principle applied in a very straightforward way to levies on greenhouse gas emissions, which again will be aggregated globally and then deployed for speeding the solutions on climate mitigation and adaptation. And that's something that is absolutely got to be complementary to what we're doing here.